Hello, today I'm talking to you outside because, oh, a bird. Because A, this book is very like foresty theme and this is the closest I could find to getting that vibe. And B, I have all my family at home now and it's much harder to film these cringy videos in secret. So I told everyone I was going on a walk and then I jumped the fence and now I'm in my backyard. So let's be quick about this. The reason we are all gathered here today is because of this little gem, underhyped gem of a book called Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert. I just want to talk about how much I loved it. And I also really liked the sequel, The Night Country, which came out like late last year. We'll talk about this one later for spoilers, but I want to talk about this one because this one was very divisive. People either hated it or loved it, and I want to convince you why you should be on my side of the coin of loving it, because there ain't nothing as original as this. This is gonna be spoiler free, so if you haven't read it, it's all good. But I am gonna do spoilers when I talk about the sequel because I kinda have to. So hear me out. This book is wonderful. This was just strange enough and unexpected enough to just be very memorable and hit me in the right place. I think a lot of things that are my favorites are a little bit offbeat. Even though I do read a lot of popular things and really enjoy a lot of popular things, I think that my favorite things are usually just on the outskirts a little bit, and this is definitely one of them. And I'm gonna get to this design because this design is stunning, so I'm gonna get to that later. But first of all, this book is about a 17-year-old girl named Alice. Her and her mum, Ella, are kind of drifters. They go from couch to couch, taking odd jobs, and bad luck follows them everywhere they go. They're both kind of like edgy, they both like smoke cigarettes and have tattoos and things like that. There is this sort of overshadowing figure of Alice's grandmother, who's like a reclusive writer. She doesn't have a relationship with Ella or Alice. They aren't really in her life, and the grandmother lives in the place called the Hazel Wood, and she's written these dark fairy tales that have like a cult following and like a kind of underground sort of stuff. So one day Alice gets back to the apartment that they're living at and finds that her mother is missing, and in her place is an envelope with one of the pages from the book of fairy tales that her grandmother has written. So this book is mostly about Alice going to go find her mother with the help of this boy at her school, Finch, who's like this pretentious rich boy, and he knows everything about her grandmother's stories. If I had one word to describe this book, it would probably be like prickly. I see why this book was divisive and not like for everyone, but I still think that it was wonderful. Alice, let me tell you about Alice. She's our main character. Alice isn't really a likable character. She definitely has her flaws, the main one being that she has a temper, but I really enjoy that because along the way you get to see how she grows. For some reason, I really like angry female leads. Don't know what that says about me. Please discuss. She has very sharp, witty observations about people around her. She's very street smart, and you really grow to like her when there's a really, really unlikable character that comes in, and then she just sort of like just absolutely roasts them in her head, which is fantastic. Then we have Ella, which is Alice's mum, and I love Ella. Even though she is not present for most of this book, you really understand why she does the thing that she does. And I really love the relationship between Ella and Alice. And then there's Finch, who is this pretentious hipster type. He's basically if Gansey from the Raven Boys had a Kurt Vonnegut tattoo. Just like Gansey, he has this weird obsession, which is, for him, the obsession is with the grandmother's fairy tale stories. He is like kind of like literary and pretentious and hipster. You don't know how far he will go in order to find answers for the thing that he's obsessed with. So Finch asks Alice out one day at school, and Alice is like, no thanks, I'm alone with my cold dead heart, bye. And then she ends up needing his help because he is one of the very few people who have read all of the fairy tales that her grandmother has written. Finch uses his money and resources to help Alice find her mother, and along the way Alice is sort of wondering what his stake in this is, why he is helping her and why he's doing all of this. But at the same time, when you're trying to work out his true motivations and whether you can truly trust him, he starts to grow on Alice and they have like sort of a friendship, and that kind of in turn helps Alice get over her distrust of people. One of the things I was most impressed by in this book was the writing style. I really, really loved it. It's very lyrical, but in a very subtle way. It's like if you took Laini Taylor and like dialed it down like by 10. Melissa Albert writes like very vivid images, but in very efficient language. And one thing that she really focuses on is like a sense of smell. So this is the smell that Alice smells when she walks into her mother's apartment and finds her missing because there's been like magical happenings going on there, the first thing that hit me was the smell. A wet, almost rotten scent, with something wild curling beneath it. Something green. It crawled under my skin and set my heart to hammering. Or this one, when Ella finds out that her mother, so Alice's grandmother, has died. Ella's voice cracked in half before she could finish. She put her head down on my knees and sobbed once. It was a desolate sound that belonged somewhere else, out there with dark roads and dead leaf smells, not in this bright room in the middle of a loud, bright city. When I kissed the crown of her hair, it smelled like diner coffee and the smoke twining up from her cigarette. She breathed in, out, and turned her face up to look at me. I just really love her writing. I don't know, I just think it's really good. Melissa Albert also kills it with similes. Kills it. And the writing just really contributes to what I love most about this book, which is really the tone and the atmosphere. We so easily transition from this gritty city of New York with taxi cabs and bad coffee and all this sort of stuff, everyday life, to this magical, dark, creeping fantasy world. Did I mention that this is a debut novel? Something I really love in stories of all kinds is just like when we have the everyday right up against the spectacular or the wonderful or fantastical, which is why this book really hit the spot for me. I will say, this book was almost perfect if it hadn't been for one thing, and that was the pacing. It was so disappointing because I loved the rest of this book. It was just like not well paced at the end. So 90% of the book was chef's kiss perfect, but the last 10% I was like, oh no. I really liked the world and I liked what was going on. I just wish that it had either been a longer book or it had been like a sequel maybe even, although I don't think it needed a sequel, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Just make it a little longer, please, Melissa Albert. Please. That being said, I loved where our characters ended up. I loved the twist that it had at the end. I think that if you enjoyed the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire, you would enjoy these books. I wanted to include at the end of this review like a little bit about the design, because I know, especially for me, the design of a physical book, if I'm reading a physical book, does impact my reading experience. I know that can sound a little bit superficial to some people, but there's a reason why people spend so much time and effort into making these beautiful covers, and it's because it does entice you to pick up, and also it sets the tone and the expectations for what kind of a story you're getting, which then I think influences how you view the book at the end. So I want to talk about the design for this particular book. The original cover for this is black and gold. I have the Alcrate edition, which is green and gold. The beautiful cover really enhanced my enjoyment of the book because the color green is used a lot throughout the book. I kind of wish that they'd published the original one in this color. So even though I love the story on its own, the design just really took it up a notch. Anyway, all of this foiling, all of these images have some significance to the actual story. The bird cage, a character walks around with a bird cage. I would keep going back and forth from the story to look at the cover to be like, oh, a feather, a comb, and a bone. I wonder if that's on the cover. Or like this dagger, or the gates. All of it has some sort of significance, which I loved. In addition to that, a lot of the chapters have little illustrations at the beginning. The end pages are wonderful. We get snippets of the grandmother's fairy tales in this book, and when we do get those snippets, they're told with these edges around them, these nice little decorative details, which really sets it apart from the rest of the story and gives it like this really odd, discomforting feeling. I just think between like the subtle like Easter eggs on the cover and the illustrations, the whole design was really wonderful in establishing this as a really eerie book with like those gothic vibes. So now that we've talked about this, I'm going to move on to the sequel, The Night Country. I'm going to have spoilers for both of these books now, so click away if you don't want spoilers, or if you don't care, just hang around. Hi, how are you? So again, the design on this is stunning. I love this blue and red. The foiling on the cover are Easter eggs for what happens on the inside. The end pages are wonderful. It's grey, so it matches the first book. Hooray for that. I didn't think when I finished the Hazel Wood that I needed a sequel. I was happy where it left off, but I'm not going to pretend like I didn't love this. We pick up back with Alice in New York, where she is struggling with her two identities as somebody who is Story, who came from the hinterland, and somebody who wants to live a normal life, graduate high school, get a job, etc. Leave all of the creepy magic stuff behind her. So there's this support group that gets together of people from the hinterland who have come into the real world, and Alice is part of that, but things get chaotic when a new leader comes along and all of these ex-stories start getting murdered. And because Alice ripped a hole between our world and the hinterland, there's a plane. Oh my god, how long is this plane? Because Alice ripped a hole between our world and the hinterland by accident, all of these people from the hinterland are coming in to our world, and the hinterland is sort of slowly dying off. I really liked the theme of displacement in this. There's another plane. I should have just filmed inside. I really liked the theme of displacement in this book because basically these ex-stories are all refugees, and it just kind of shows the importance of having a support system and having people who understand where you came from and what that's like. And the characters that we meet in this book from the hinterland are really, really weird and original. They really remind me of the characters that we meet from the Wayward Children series. There is a girl whose grandmother is the moon. There's a character who can tell you your time of death. Weird stuff. We also got more of Ella in this book, which I really liked because we got to explore that relationship between Ella and Alice even more, and what it means for them now that Alice has realized that Ella is not her real mother. The biggest issue I had with this one, which was the same as the Hazel Wood, and that was the pacing. It was better than last time, but the first, I'd say 200 pages were just kinda slow. I think the first book kept a really nice pace all the way up until like the last 10%, but this book, it was like the first 10% you just had to get through, and then the rest of it was good. I was mostly just reading it because I loved the writing style so much and I just wanted to keep reading more of it. When we finally did get to Finch's storyline, because we knew he was coming back, but when we finally got to his storyline, we find that there are many different fantasy worlds out there, just like the hinterland, and Finch meets a traveler and gets to go through some of these other worlds, so the world is really, really expanded upon in this book. I loved the invention of the magical pen, where Finch can write on anything and then those words pop up in Alice's life, say like in a book that she's reading. Where do you even come up with something like that? That is so cool. I love all of the little magical details that Melissa Albert puts into her world. I just think like the tone of everything is just so spot on. And I like the antagonist in this book. I thought it was really good. I wasn't seeing the twist coming. I wasn't really looking for it, but like I wasn't seeing the twist coming. And then it wrapped up and we got closure with all of these characters, which was lovely. But we still don't know the ending of Alice 3 times. We don't know the ending of one of the fairy tales that has been like the main fairy tale throughout these 2 books, and that's like been a big mystery. But I did hear that Melissa Albert is publishing a book with all of the fairy tales in it, so all of the tales from the hinterland, so you best bet I'm pre-ordering the hell out of that. Okay, I hope I maybe convinced you to take a read or maybe even change a few opinions. Please let me know if you have any weird fantasy recommendations that are sort of similar in tone to this, like with an everyday world meeting a fantastical world and like some sort of darkness in it as well. If you have any thoughts on this duology, let me know. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for watching. Bye.